in person after 2 years of us hosting it online. And although we had a great audience online, more than 1,100 of you logged in, it is not the same as being here today in person. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the effort. I hope you have an interesting and enjoyable Africa debate. The past couple of years were challenging for Invest Africa, like for so many of you in the room. But for an organization like ourselves, which is all about connecting people and connecting businesses and connecting opportunities in Africa for more than 60 years, we had to find new ways of doing that communication. And somehow we managed to do it. But I know that we really managed to do it and pull it off so well because of the support of the members and the network that we have across the continent. So I'd like to say, in the first instance, thank you to all of you for that support. I do believe, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, that having come through this, we have a renewed sense of purpose for what Africa has to offer on the global stage, and I think it's going to be centre to discussions in terms of the global economic situation going forward. One of the great losses, as we all know, was not being able to travel to the continent. And as seasoned Africa-focused businesses, looking at all of you around the room, I know that it's incredibly difficult and challenging to actually form partnerships and meet people and get things done if you can't travel. So it's great to be back traveling, doing what we do best, and that is really introducing all of you investors to new markets and helping businesses to form those partnerships, which is so valuable. We spent the first half of this year doing just that. We've been traveling. We've been to our chapter cities in Dubai, in South Africa. We've hosted events at the CEO Forum in Abidjan and in Nairobi. And it's only fitting, therefore, that we've come back at the half-year mark to London, which is the home of Invest Africa, for this, our flagship event. A personal highlight for me was taking our first investor mission in, really since 2019, to Tanzania in May, which we did with in partnership with NABA, the Norwegian Africa Business Association. And we accompanied 40 companies, our largest investor mission to date, showing a very keen interest in that Tanzanian market opportunity. And we're delighted that Minister Kijaji, the Minister for Investment, Industry and Trade, will actually be joining us with her delegation this morning and continuing the conversations that we started in Dar es Salaam in May. As I mentioned, the last two editions were online, and we focused very much on the continent's resilience and the continent's recovery and the road to recovery. We all discussed the need for a great reset and how we could reshape Africa's economies to serve Africa's priorities. Today, we're focused on how to make those ambitions and plans a reality. And what we're talking about, and you've seen it on the program, is mobilization. Mobilizing our people, mobilizing the finances, and mobilizing Africa's natural resources. And that's not just for Africa, but for the global fight against climate change. And we're pleased to be partnering with the Africa Finance Corporation, who've been doing a fantastic job on all of these points above, particularly in the last point on climate change. And their white paper on Africa's path to net zero makes a really interesting and pragmatic reading. So I urge you all to take a look at that. All of us know that mobilization at the scale that Africa needs calls for coordinated effort on behalf of government and the private sector. And this is the point of the Africa debate. We're here to facilitate those conversations, to share those ideas and that collaboration. Today's program is packed with excellent speakers from both the public sector and the private sector. And if I may, I'd like to make mention of a few leading voices in particular, with whom we've shared their successes in business, but also their considerable contribution to Africa's wider development. They are, of course, Strive Masiwe, chairman of Econet Group, who will be joining us at lunchtime, and Mohamed Douji, president of METL Group, who's just joined us. Welcome, Mohamed. Yeah, thank you. Mohamed was also our amazing ambassador on our investor mission to Tanzania recently, and we thank you for your help and assistance in making that so smooth. I know you'll be looking forward to their insights in terms of the global economic situation and the role that Africa will play. So both Mo and Strive will be on stage later. I'm also honoured to welcome Professor Benedict Arama, President of Afrexim Bank, once again to the Africa debate. He is such an enormous supporter of everything that Invest Africa does. I think you will agree with me, his vision and his leadership was so much in evidence throughout the pandemic. And we're really proud of the ongoing partnership we have with the Afrexim Bank and the role we're playing in helping to organise the Intra-Africa Trade Fair, the 3rd edition, which will be in Abidjan in November 2023. So if you don't know anything about that event, please do get in touch with me and the team. We're also delighted to support Secretary General Wamkele Mene and his team. On his recent trip to the UK, he sought to ensure that the views of the private sector, the priorities of the private sector, were being considered when drafting the legislation. And we're looking forward to an update from him on the progress they are making with the implementation of that agreement across the region. Invest Africa has long been a supporter of building genuine partnerships between the UK and Africa. And we continue to work closely with the UK and African governments across the different pillars of both trade and development. A particular highlight over the past year has been the work that we're doing on the Growth Gateway Programme, which is a business support service aimed at fostering two-way trade and investment between the continent and the UK. I believe that the level of senior representation we're having from the UK government here today is testament to the importance of the UK-Africa relationship. And we're going to be pleased to be joined by the Secretary of State for International Trade, Right Honourable Anne-Marie Trevelyan, shortly, as she will be unveiling and giving us an update on the announcement that the Prime Minister made at CHOGM about the government's new Developing Countries Trading Scheme. It was announced, but details were promised this morning. So, as Mark said, let's see what unveils there. So thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of my formal part of this welcome remark. But they would be incomplete without me thanking a few people in the room. And I'd like to do that now while I have your attention and not at 6 o'clock when you are thinking about the champagne reception in the crypt downstairs. So I have your attention. I'm going to take advantage of it for just a moment. I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors. The generosity of the sponsors and their support and our strategic partners is invaluable. You can see their logos behind me and in front of me, and they really have stood by us in putting on this first live event. We have a great lineup of speakers, and without whom we would not have been able to create this amazing program. I would also like to pay tribute and thank the chairman of the advisory board, of our advisory board, and Right Honourable Mark Simmonds. And as many of you in the room know, but not all of you, Mark used to be the Minister for Africa. And I always say that I demote him when I make him the chairman of the Invest Africa Advisory Board, but he is and has always been a great support for me. I'd also like to thank the Invest Africa Advisory Board. They have been, again, over the last 2 years, enormously supportive. And here in the room with us, we have, I'm going to name check them, we have Runa Alam, I have Lanre Akinole that I can see out of the corner, I have Rene Awambang, I'm trying to see if Rene's here yet, Mohammed Duji, Sanjeev Gupta at the back, Kusum Kalin at the front, and Zemedena Nagato. And I don't know where Zem is. Where's Zem? I can't see him at the moment, but I have seen him this morning. Please do seek them out. They have a wealth of experience across markets and sectors in Africa, and you will find them really interesting and full of good advice. Finally, it would be wrong of me not to mention my team. I want to say a huge thank you to them. They've worked tirelessly to pull this together and to make it a reality after 2 years of misstarts. So thank you to them, and thank you to the past members of the team who are in the room as well, who also helped in the run-up to the organization. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a really successful, but most of all, enjoyable Africa debate. And I'm now going to hand you back to Mark Simmonds. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, very much indeed. And I think I would like to just reiterate Karen's very warm welcome and say how wonderful it is to be here in person and to see a number of very familiar faces, but also some new ones, which is tremendously exciting to see. I also just want to, on behalf of all the membership of Invest Africa, Karen, just to thank you and the team, particularly for not just keeping the show on the road during the difficult COVID times, but also making sure that there were a significant number of intelligent, dynamic, interesting events that took place online, which really kept the whole of the Invest Africa family together. And I don't think perhaps everybody appreciates the enormous amount of hard work and effort that was required to do that. Now, you'll be delighted to hear that I'm not going to speak for very long this morning because we're determined to keep this Africa debate on time and on schedule. But I do just think it's worth pointing out a couple of things before we start. That clearly for Africa, the COVID had a significant negative impact. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has, with increasing commodity, fuel and food prices. The potential for financial risks due to high and vulnerable debt levels in some parts of Africa creates another risk that needs to be monitored. But despite that, Africa is on the right trajectory. 3.6% GDP growth predicted in 2022, up to 4.2% 2023. The Africa Free Trade Agreement is in place, making progress, and we'll have more of that later. A single air transport market in place, protocol on free movement, a focus on peace and increasingly good governance, although we'd all accept that is still too patchy and more needs to be done. An emphasis rightly on integration, developmental infrastructure, human capital development and prosperity, much of which is enshrined in the pillars of Agenda 2063. And this will lead to increasing intra-African trade, supporting industrial development, further business opportunities, encouraging an accelerated uptake of digitalization and e-commerce and technology accessibility. But of course, it isn't without challenges. Having said that, the private sector is not just important, but has a pivotal role to play and to act as the fulcrum for the investment into financial capital, human capital, and natural capital, the themes of today's Africa debate. And importantly, not just into large corporations and large investments, but for SME businesses, especially those run by women and young people, which constitute 80% of those businesses in Africa. And what will deliver is what we all want to see to drive economic growth, economic diversification, economic development, and job creation for Africans across the continent. And there are many organisations, but one organisation that has done exactly that in the last few years is the African Finance Corporation. And I'm delighted we have with us today Somalia Zubaru, the President and CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation. And for those of you who don't know the Africa Finance Corporation, I would urge you to do so. It is a very dynamic, energetic, forward-thinking and forward-looking Pan-African multilateral developmental financial institution, headquartered in Nigeria, but with a continental reach, involved in project development, advisory, investing, corporate finance, across all of the key sectors on the continent, and having a really key and ever-increasing impact and a significant role in enhancing Africa's economic development. And it is not just the President and the CEO, although he's a very impressive gentleman, as you're about to hear, but he's lucky and fortunate enough to have an extremely impressive team around him. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to Somalia Zubaru, the President and CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation.